Love your city, every back road, every alley, every pothole. Love your city, every back road. Come together, fight for your home.
Welcome to the Love Your City podcast. My name is Bob Dalton, and each episode I interview people doing grassroots work in their communities. This episode, I have the privilege to interview Lexie Wood. She is the executive director of St. John's Ministries, and she has a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate in social work. Thank you for spending time with me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We're here in Green Bay, and it's the city, from what I've heard, this is my first time in Green Bay, and it's the city of good beer. It's the city of cheese, and of course, the Packers. For you, what do you think of when you think of Green Bay?
I would first of all say those exact same three things. That defines the city. But for me, I mean, Green Bay is also home. So it's the place of so many relationships. And it's this space where I am the most inspired to see what's possible. Just watching, what peers and friends are doing.
That's awesome. So take me back on, obviously you're doing a lot of work here in Green Bay. You've been doing work here for quite a while, and you've studied so much on particularly social work. Somebody like you who's doing this much work in the community has spent a ton of your education on studying this type of work. What was your motivation? Take us back to kind of the early parts of your story of what even got you involved in this work.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those stories where you could really grab a coffee and talk for hours. The very simple answer is this is what I was created and put on this earth to do. And it was so clearly laid out for me at such an early age that I felt called to this line of work without having any personal experience or interaction with it. And there was something intrinsically within me that knew that everybody deserved a home, that everybody deserved to know they mattered. And so from drawings as a child up through then experiences, whether my parents were giving me experiences, what our own journey walked through, it all just led me into this path that at the end of the day really truly is about helping people understand their inherent worth, helping them understand their potential, and reigniting that within individuals so they can move forward. And so it just so happens that the mechanism that I feel called to do that is by making sure people have access to safe housing and that sense of home and all that home represents, but it's so much larger than that. And so from this drawing I put in a notebook as a child of the shelter I wanted to one day run to all that we are today, it all just speaks to this journey that I was created and hopefully and successfully living out.
Well, when you were young, is there anybody in your life that you looked up to or you were inspired by that was doing that type of work?
Honestly, no. I don't think I knew anybody that was doing the work. In terms of homelessness, I didn't know anybody that was homeless. But so I had this moment of just knowing this is what I wanted to one day do. I believed I'd be 45 years old when I would be called to do it. I let God know my entire life plan, and this was the 45-year mark. And then after that, my family walked through just a season of I wouldn't even say economic instability. We always knew we had a home. We knew we had that, but just some risk factors that I think created empathy. And so if I were to look at who do I look up to, it's truly my parents. And what I saw in them was when they walked through this season, what they did to provide for us kids. And so when we came out of that, my parents went into different careers. We were stable. My parents are still married, but they looked to get me opportunities knowing this is what I was passionate about. And so they started taking me, my dad would take me to Milwaukee to volunteer and different opportunities to go with my youth group to experience homelessness in Chicago. And so they helped feed the passion within me. They helped set up that vision and show me what it could look like. But when I felt called and created to do this work, I can't say there was a leader I was looking to. It's just something that intrinsically within me, I knew I wanted to be about.
That's powerful. What was kind of looking back on your journey, what was the hardest part of your journey to stay true to that?
I think when you're living out your passion, when you're living out your giftings and your calling, you're blessed in the work because your skills are created for that. Everything kind of aligns. And so with that, I don't want to say success comes easy, but you're naturally living out what you were created to do, it is going to come easier than if you step into something else. And sometimes then I think success can be a challenge because it could open up doors that are outside of your calling, that because you looked really good doing A, hey, maybe you'd like to consider B. And the reality is if I'm doing well in A, it's because A is exactly where I'm called to be. And so I think just for me, I'm very driven. I'm an achiever. And so to be very content saying, I am living out what I'm called to be in this season. I can be faithful to this. There are certainly still people to reach and people to serve. And so it's not like I'm growing complacent, and we've grown our programs and we have an amazing staff and what we're doing in Green Bay. But I think one of the challenges is just knowing what your calling is, and then being okay to have blinders, because there's lots of things you could be good at. There's lots of things you could have passion around, but what is it that you bring so uniquely, such a unique value add that nobody else could do and fill the role that you're filling?
Yeah. When it comes to getting your doctorate, obviously that's an amazing personal accomplishment. It's something that very few people, get to experience. Apart from the personal side and the excitement of accomplishing something like that, staying the course, was it worth it? Was it worth it from an educational standpoint?
I would say it depends on the day, but deep down, I would say absolutely. And twofold. One, well, I guess maybe threefold. One is it's opened the door and it's allowed me to sit at tables that I look around going, how in the world did I get here? And so that degree has provided that opportunity to me to really start to impact systemic change. I've been able to do work on Capitol Hill. I've been able to meet with leaders and people that I just really respect what they're about, and I can meet with them as peers. And so that's been really great. Two is my doctoral program was really focused on social innovation. It was focused on design thinking and looking at your community and how do you transform your community through innovation. And that's not the way a lot of people are looking. And so it got really personal to Green Bay. It was really intentional about, for me, homelessness and child welfare and kind of the merging of those two. And so I just get to live out my callings and bring creativity and bring innovation and do all of that. So that, I would just say that alone made the degree so worth it. And then the third, more personally, but for my kids to be able to look and see that you can accomplish anything, that when you are called to something, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Being called to something doesn't mean the path will be paved and it's going to be an expressway. It might be challenging, but you're capable. And when you get to the other side, the rewards are certainly worth it.
Yeah. And speaking of your kids, share a little bit about your kids.
Yeah. So I got into foster care when I was 28 because of St. John's. And so the shelter, that we run serves adults 18 and up. And I was seeing kids on their 18th birthday show up at the shelter, and they're making up their bed, and they're making up their bed next to perhaps somebody, who had addiction for 30, 40 years. And I'm watching these kids. My younger brother was that age at the time. And I'm just going, there's no world in which this is okay. They're kids. And nobody grows up dreaming of their 18th birthday, checking into the local homeless shelter. And so I went to the board. I asked them to look at it differently. They took up the conversation for close to a year. But Wisconsin, we don't have emancipation laws. There were just some challenges. And they finally came back and just said, we can't serve homeless teens. Like, that's outside of our scope. And I remember driving home that night so convicted that if I felt passionate about something and felt that my employer should get involved, what was I willing to personally do? And so I went into foster care specifically to serve teens. I wanted kids in my home because I didn't want them in our shelter. And so I did that for a while. And then my son, he's now 12, he was 4 at the time, was placed with me. And I said, a 4-year-old wasn't the plan. And he completely changed my life. My kids are the best thing that's ever happened to me. And so he was placed with me a few years ago. My other 3 siblings out of 3 were placed with me. So I've had 14 kids, so that my 4 permanent children all came to me through foster care, specifically tied to my role at St. John's. But then in the case of each of my 4 kids, with direct ties to the shelter themselves, with extended family members and whatnot. And so I just have this really unique lens to look at the entire spectrum from, my youngest now she's 4. And so I know the statistics for her life to end up at St. John's. And then I have, the guests we're serving every day at the shelter. And I'm seeing how broken systems play out. I'm seeing the trajectory. I'm seeing the statistics. But then I'm also seeing how to impact the statistics, because I know my daughter's not going to end up here because of the investment of one really stable, loving adult in her life. And so I can't separate work and home. It's one big calling, but yet that's why I'm so passionate. I love kids. I absolutely love kids, but that's why I'm so passionate about our organization that serves adults, is because I believe each adult we serve is somebody who grew up and aged out, and that support didn't get there. And suddenly, instead of pointing at a broken system, we're wanting to point a finger at a broken human being and the choices they're making. And so I believe all day I get to love on the grown-up version of the kids. And then I get to go home at night and I get to love on my own kids.
That's amazing. And for everyone who's listening, we'll get to the work that you're doing through St. John's here in a second. But can you speak to what was the process like for you dealing with the complexities of the foster care system and all that? I think it'd be really important for you to address.
That is probably the single greatest challenge in my life, is watching a broken system, watching kids who are impacted by a broken system, and not knowing how to best leverage my voice. And I don't say that lightly. So all day long, I'm addressing systemic change and looking at broken systems as an executive director. And yet I can manage the stress and the complexities and what needs to change for adults better than I know how to navigate for kids. And so I just grabbed lunch last week she quickly became a friend for life. We had just been put in contact with each other, somebody who's walking through a fairly similar journey. And my struggle has been, I know I am called to impact the system. The system's broken, and everybody knows how I feel about it if they know me personally. But my struggle has been, how do I fix the system for all the kids when I don't always feel like I know how to fix it for one kid? And, so without getting into details, I've had a personal journey where I've watched my child fall through the cracks for 8 consistent years. A middle schooler who's been waiting on adoption since he was 4 years old, begging for adoption, and he's not there yet. And so it's really challenging to know that the system is set up at such a large scale level that the system's not looking at my boy. The system's not knowing the hopes and dreams and fears of my kid. And so he, a few years ago, had written a multi-page letter trying to get his voice out there. But the system, the child welfare system, and this is nothing against the workers in the field. They are incredible, and they're stepping into things I could never do, witnessing things I would not be able to see. But the system itself is set up to protect. And I say this lightly, and I hope it's received with grace, but the system is set up to protect the rights of the parents, even if that's at the expense of the child. And so when you are in this role, I went into foster care to serve the kids, but to serve the kids, hopefully connecting them to parents. Like my desire was my desire is to help people to live in the fullness of their lives. But when you have a child that can't happen with the birth home, but the child also, one of the phrases that I've heard in my home is, why do I have to keep living in my past? When do I get to start living in my future? And that's 8 years into this. And so I can't really answer your question because I'm at this crossroads myself.
Yeah, you're observing, you're studying, you're experiencing firsthand.
Right.
Is there anything that stands out like really blatantly, like this one particular thing, and it's got to change?
I think the focus has to be on the child. This is the Lexie Wood. This isn't me representing any organization. My personal opinion is that the minute the courts have to get involved in the life of the child, that child should be in the number one seat. And you hopefully could put biological parents in the second seat, and you're working and you're hoping it can be reunited, but we have to flip it. And right now the system is not set up for that minor child. That minor child doesn't have a voice. And so to change that, because that's going to change it for that kid, it's going to break the cycles. We're so often, again, when I'm talking about my kids and I can talk about their direct ties to a homeless shelter I run for adults. And I'm not just talking one family member, I'm talking the family tree. if you want to break that cycle, if you want to end homelessness in our communities, if you want to address mental health and addiction, no matter what complex societal problem you look like, I can draw a direct line back to that child development and child welfare. And even, linking it to my work, moves due to housing instability, moves due to housing costs. Each move decreases an individual's chance of graduating from high school. And so I say that in this context just to say the decisions we're making for these children have lifetime impacts, but they're a case number. And we're making these decisions and we're delaying this process because everybody has rights. And I respect that. And I respect our system being set up that way. But what's that going to do to that child's development? And so if we're going to change that system, and that's where I just think I have such a unique lens, because I see the children, I see the output in the shelter if they don't get the help. But if we want to fix the system, we have got to start looking at the needs of that child above and before anything else.
Well said. You have an amazingly unique perspective in that you're not only fostering some kids, but you now run a shelter, a ministry, a program here in Green Bay, St. John's. Well, give us the history of St. John's Ministries, who started it and how long it had been going on before you came in.
Yeah. So St. John's was started by a couple of really dynamic community members. I am personally blessed to call each and every one of them a friend, which is just incredible. But they were doing some street outreach, and they just found that there were individuals in the community who didn't qualify for mainstream shelter programs, whether it was due to mental health or addiction or not having an ID or criminal record, whatever the reason, they were living on the streets. And so Green Bay is not a spot where you can live on the streets for an extended period of time. We have really harsh winters. And so they just felt like everybody, regardless of their situation, regardless of their choices, everybody deserved a safe place to sleep at night. And so St. John's Shelter started as a group of churches back in 2005. And it was just the church response to homelessness in our community. It evolved. It looked a couple different ways, but at its core, it's always remained true to being a shelter of last resort to ensure that nobody has to sleep on the streets in our harsh winter elements due to any criteria, that belief that everybody deserves access to safe housing. And so it started in 2005. I was brought on as the executive director in 2012. And many of those founding members are still involved, very closely involved in our operations to this day, which is incredible.
That's awesome. So describe some of your operations that you guys do now. I know you have 3 different facilities. You have a lot of different things going on. Can you break some of those down?
You bet. So we have our overnight shelter remains a shelter of last resort. We are very unique in the fact that we do not operate with a capacity. And so we will find a way to meet the need. So if you were to enact a capacity, for instance, we have a building capacity of 84. If you enact that capacity, there's an individual who's number 85 who's showing up at your door. That is somebody's son or somebody's daughter. That's somebody with a story. And you'd be turning them out to the streets. And, the wind chill could be -30. It could be freezing rain, whatever the case is. And so we have a model where we work with local churches and we run offsite overflow, but we will find a way to meet the need each night. That program has unfortunately grown tremendously in the last 17 years, just the need. And yet at the same time, we've been blessed that we have the community support and the financial support to be able to respond to that need. And so our goal through the other programs that I'll talk about in a second is we want to get upstream. We want to address systemic issues. We want to remove barriers for individuals to move forward. We don't believe success isn't a shelter coming back every year going, we were able to serve more people than ever before. It's great that we have the resources, but that's not success. Our goal is to figure out how to trend these numbers down to get people on track with whatever their goals and their dreams are and to be able to move them forward. And so we do that through our daytime resource centers. And so we have the Micah Center, which is a wraparound resource center where we try to bring all the resources on site. So an individual, whatever it is they're working towards, whatever their goals are, the support and the resources are here to help them get there. And so we have a robust case management team. We have on-site medical and mental health services. We have workshops and daily programming all day long. We have a computer lab. We have employment training programs. We have, guest grant programs, which are job coaching programs. We have AA and NA groups. We have everything you can think of. And as a faith-based nonprofit, we offer kind of two tracks of each thing we offer. We have one with a faith component, and yet we never require that of our guests. It's what drives us in our work. But then we'll offer an alternative that doesn't have that if that's not where they're at in their journey. And so that all happens in the Micah Center. And then each day when we close, we offer our space to other nonprofits doing like-minded work that they can come in and utilize our space to run their programs and to connect with individuals as well. Wellspring is a women's specific version of our daytime resource center. So many of the same services, the same approach, and yet it's tailored to women who have been victims of domestic violence or sexual abuse, who want that safe, gender-specific area to be able to work towards their goals. And so we offer, again, the services of Micah Center in a women's specific context. And then this summer, we are now opening, connected to Wellspring, a women's specific overnight shelter so that we can really tend to the needs of both genders, their unique needs in separate environments. So those are our three main sites. And then beyond that, we offer programs. We offer street outreach. We offer park outreach, different programs out in the community to build a relationship and encourage them to come in and attach to the services and programs we provide.
Yeah. Because you guys are so community oriented, relationally oriented, is there a relationship or a person that stands out to you of someone who's really meant something special to you along the way that have came and been a part of this community?
There is a profound impact on my life, and it's probably not, there are many. There are so many people who have touched my life along the years, and I've grown so much as a person and as a professional through so many. And I can think of various guests, just incredibly resilient, loving guests we've served. I can think of volunteers, so many stories, but the one truly that stands out to me the most, and staff know, is it is a donor who I've never met. It is a donor. She is an elderly woman who lives the next county over, but every single time she sends in a donation, she writes us a letter about her son who struggles with alcohol addiction and had battled homelessness. And he never stayed with us. We have no affiliation on whatsoever, but she will provide, and you know how with elderly women, like you can tell it in their handwriting, right? Like you can just see it, but she will provide this handwritten note with an update on how her boy is doing. And she'll say, he's doing really well right now. He's got 30 days sobriety, and he lived to see another birthday. I'm so grateful for programs like yours who support the work serving people like my son. And she names her son. And then it might be a couple weeks, it might be a couple months, and you get the next letter, and it might be my boy. And of course she names him, he's relapsed, he's not doing well, or I haven't heard from him in quite some time. I know he's living on the streets in this community. I don't know where he's at, but I'm grateful. She always says, I'm grateful for programs like yours who are loving on people like my son. She names her son. And it has been like, even as I'm saying this, I'm not an emotional person. I feel so much emotion because I feel this responsibility to care for this mom who probably feels so helpless, right? To care for her son. Like, what can you do for your grown son? But she's found a way to give back. She's found a way to love on him in his addiction and in his homeless cycle. And then I feel this responsibility to her son, who I've never met. A couple of years ago, he had a medical emergency on the street. He ended up in a nursing home. And I just remember her writing a letter, just talking about how grateful she was that she knew where he was right now. And he was in a nursing home with some long-term health issues. But for this mom, it was just this relief of he's accounted for. And so like, you feel that. And I think in our line of work, sometimes community members, again, going back to the conversation we had, when kids grow up and age out of broken systems or broken households and they start making choices, it's really easy for somebody in the community to not have compassion on that individual and to point the finger and to judge them. It's really hard to cast that judgment on this poor hurting mom who just wants to love her boy. I mean, I have used her letters in so many staff meetings, just reminding our staff, you know what, every single dollar we receive, that cuts our paychecks, that drives our programs, that allows us to operate without capacity. How are we stewarding this woman's check? She could give to any organization anywhere, and she's choosing us as a way to honor her boy. And what are we going to do to honor that donation to St. John's? And I kid you not, it'd been a while, but a staff member came by this morning and let me know she had sent in another letter. And so it was there this morning. That I would say if you're talking about the most profound relationship, again, I've never met her, but she drives my work every single day I'm here.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. It's really powerful. One of my questions was, what's your motivation? What's driving your work? And it sounds like that's such a beautiful kind of mysterious thing that's driving a lot of your motivation and your work. And if I was on your team, I would feel that, that we have a responsibility on not only stewarding those resources well, but loving all people as if we're loving possibly her son,
right,
who could be coming into this program. Let's talk a little bit about the political climate here in Green Bay and how have politics helped shape, for better or for worse, the situation and the work that's going on here on the ground.
First off, I mean, we are incredibly, incredibly blessed that we have the opportunity and the relationship to work with various representatives. And I don't say that, I'm not trying to sound politically correct. I'm not in politics, but we've been able to work with people who have very differing agendas and to find that common ground of what we're after. And to do that, we've seen, whether it's state reps or senators or whoever it is, we've seen people sitting on the extremes of both ends of the aisle here connected to our work. And I know that's unique for a nonprofit. I know that's unique for a social service or a homeless provider. But I feel really blessed and grateful for that. At the same time, we don't believe the answer sits in politics. Politics is necessary. I personally enjoy public discourse on political issues. My dad's a history buff. I've been raised around that. But in our line of work, it's about individual stories. And there's no legislation, there's no sweeping bill that's going to fix or quite honestly, probably break what's in place. And so we as an organization a couple of years ago just felt like decisions being made in Washington, D.C. were not made with the interest of necessarily the guests at our front door at the forefront of their mind. And so we personally chose to walk away from all government funding. And what's nice about that is we can't get pulled into either side. We're not involved in the debate. And I'll just share real briefly kind of the example that was the final straw that led to that, of how it can impact your work and how we've chosen to not let it. And so there was this discussion, colorful discussion occurring between HUD in Washington, D.C., which is housing, and the Department of Justice. And so they were pushing back on each other, thinking the other player should do more. And it ended up playing out where HUD said, okay, we want the prisons to have a better plan for inmates that are reentering their community. And I would say, yes and amen, I agree. Their process for executing that was they told homeless shelters that if you receive funding, you cannot serve somebody who's getting released from prison because they're not literally homeless, because the prisons need to create a housing plan before they release them. Well, in theory, that's great. The reality is when that person shows up at our door, again, in that harsh winter, Green Bay winter elements, the prison's not worried about creating a housing exit plan for them. They've released them. And the direction we received was that they would need to become literally homeless, category 1, literally homeless, which means they would need to sleep in a place not meant for human habitation for a night. And then we could serve them. So if they could survive a night on the streets in Green Bay, then on day 2, we could serve them, but we couldn't serve them on day 1. And this was HUD's efforts to get Department of Justice to intervene. And we just said, our entire mission is set up to make sure nobody's on our streets in winter. We're not going to turn somebody away and say, I hope you can survive for the night, come back tomorrow. And so we reached out and we said, this funding we're receiving from you is quite minimal when you look at what it takes to run our shelter. So we will take private donations to serve that individual on the first night. And we were told, no, if you receive funding, it's kind of exponentially divided between every night of shelter you provide. And we just said, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
And we've been able to walk away and meet the need instead.
Yeah. It seems like there's immediate red tape restrictions when receiving government funds. And I hear a lot of nonprofits say one of the first things, I'll get a tour, I'll learn about their work, and they always kind of finish up the tour and they say, and we're 100% funded by local people here in the community and corporations, and we receive no government funds. And people say it proudly, right?
Yep. Yes.
What would it take? Because it seems like a waste of opportunity that the government has this much funds from our tax dollars to reinvest into solutions in society, and the people that are creating the solutions are celebrating that they're not receiving the funds. What would it take for the government to change in order for organizations like yours to receive those funds and actually put those dollars to work in a really practical, real way in local communities.
Right. And I personally know of nonprofits that get the funding and they've been able to figure out how to make it work. But I would say the funding can't come with strings attached. And so if the government wants to give money to really address the needs of the community, you need to let the community define from top down what that looks like. And so anytime it comes with red tape, because you're trying to hit their outcomes or hit the parameters to continue to receive funding or whatever it is, you end up changing the scope of who you can serve or what community needs you're looking at. So for example, if we're a shelter of last resort, wanting to make sure nobody's freezing to death in Green Bay, if your funding is tied, if it's a competitive grant tied to income growth and housing stability, those are absolutely vital things. And those are things we're working towards. But if we need to hit those metrics at a certain level, we're going to start screening out the most chronic guests who are going to be harder to hit that metric. And so the power has to come to local community levels. Again, there's a lot of government funding in our community that agencies are using. But when there's red tape that goes against mission, I'll share one more example and I'll try to share it a little more obscurely, I guess, since I don't have direct permission to share it. But there is another nonprofit in town who can serve women with children, and through the same government funding. So they serve young families, they serve young moms, and they're really trying to set those moms up for success, those moms with little kiddos. And I remember a conversation a couple of years ago where the federal government's ruling was that you couldn't break up a household. Again, the intention, great, that you want to keep a household together. But we, meaning providers, whoever, couldn't speak to what a household was. So a program set up to serve young moms and their kids. If that mom presents and she's got a 52-year-old boyfriend, they're being told you have to take him in because the mom defines that as her household. Now she breaks up with the 52-year-old boyfriend and now she's back with her children's father. Oh, now you're exiting the 52-year-old boyfriend out, but you're bringing the father in. Oh, you're breaking up with him. You're back with this significantly older man that's not healthy. You're trying to break those trends and that lifestyle, but yet you're being told you have to let this man who potentially is preying upon this very young mom back into shelter. What's the narrative that's giving to these children who are watching an organization essentially be forced to adapt to that? And I don't even know where the agency went with that funding. I don't know how that story ends. But when it's becoming issues of conscience or issues of mission at that level that go against the very work you're looking to do, that's not effective government funding.
Yeah, and there's definitely case studies for effective government funding. Like PPP loans seemed to be relatively effective in some regard to businesses that needed it. And they gave it a really clear guideline of it has to be primarily given to pay payroll and keep people actively engaged in your business. And it was really clear right out the gate. It was relatively simple on how you could eliminate that and turn that loan into a forgiveness.
Right.
And it seemed like it was effective for a lot of people. It helped a lot of businesses and organizations, and obviously some more than others, but it could have been better, of course. But there are effective ways to utilize government funds to where it's actually helping move things forward in a particularly broken situation.
And even in that example, it was payroll assistance, right? Mm-hmm. And so often funding is direct client assistance with all the strings attached. And funding doesn't like to support what it takes to just run the programs, and that's people. So what would it look like for governments just to say, we trust the work you're doing. You're responding to the needs in your community because you're getting community support that displays that. So we're just going to support. We're going to off-write the cost of your case manager, and we're going to trust you to figure out who you're going to serve and how, and give that power, something as simple as that to the local community could have a huge impact.
Yeah, 100%. You've used the terminology a couple of times, upstream.
Yes.
It's interesting because I've only heard that used one other time through another friend of mine who's doing community work. And he keeps kind of preaching we have to get upstream. And can you define what you mean by that and what you feel like is a way for us to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think for me, to kind of merge analogies, is you have a complex problem and there's going to be layers to it. And you've got to peel back every layer to get to the core of what drove that. So it's really easy to look at the issue of homelessness and define it as homelessness. And there is nobody in America, there's no second grade classroom you can walk into right now where that child desires to grow up and experience homelessness. It's not within us. And yet we seem to think when somebody is experiencing homelessness, we want to say, well, they're making that choice, pull themselves up by their bootstrap if they just do X, Y, Z, as if somewhere between, second grade and 21, they've just decided that's the course they wanted for their life. And so you can look at the behavior, you can look at the symptom, you can look at the issue, but you got to trace it back. Why is somebody homeless? Is it generational trauma? Is it mental health? Is it all these different things? And even there, you get to that one, and then you got to figure out the next one. And so it's getting upstream to the source, the feeder into all of this stuff. And so when I was in my doctoral program, there were the 10 challenges for social work. And it was these different, big, complex, they called them wicked problems that were impacting the field. And I just remember access to healthcare for youth was on the list, domestic violence, criminal justice reform, all these different things. So homelessness was one, and so naturally that's the route I went down. But when I looked at the other 9, I said a breakdown in any of these 9 problems all results in homelessness. So you've got these 10 really complex, again, as they said, wicked problems impacting our social fabric. And yet 9 of them are all compounding homelessness. So you can't just focus on homelessness without getting upstream, looking at those other 9, look at what contributes to those 9, coming back to the source. And then that's what you need to change if you really want to start to see the ripple effect.
Yeah, I've used the analogy that homelessness isn't necessarily a problem. It's a result of a lot of different problems.
Yes.
It's a puddle from the streams of a lot of other problems.
Exactly.
One thing that I say often is by talking with a bunch of people who are creating solutions in different communities and specifically in the realm of homelessness, you really have 3 tiers. You have meeting of immediate need. You have kind of a transitional program, helping people really transition and give them support to transition out of difficult circumstances. And then you have the housing.
Yep.
Out of those 3 elements, what do you feel like is the weakest in Green Bay?
I would say the area that I'm most passionate about creating change is the housing. But I would add a 4th tier to your 3, because we as crisis response agencies do a really good job serving people once they're homeless and at our doors. But what are we doing to create a buffer, to create a really solid wall so that this flow into our shelters and our crisis response agencies stops? And so again, going back to the research and my latest degree and the fact it was focused on innovation, every employee, all my coworkers had to come along for that ride because it just awakened something within me. I'm a passionate person. That's pretty, people can see that pretty quickly, but this is a whole nother level. And the issue of homeless prevention and housing and how they can coexist. If we can, so the phrase I use is bookend. Let's bookend the acute homeless experience. Let's figure out how to get people off the cliff and to give them stability right where they're at, so that we can stop the flow into these other programs. So we stop the need for transitional living, all of that. But for those that are currently in our programs, what does it look like to have housing that really walks that path forward with them? And so what we are after, we're looking at a concept that we've coined socially inclusive housing. It's a different way of looking at housing that serves the whole person, that creates an internal savings plan. So we're taking their financial capital and saving it towards their future financial goals while they're still living paycheck to paycheck. It has a community resource advocate on site. So should they miss rent, it's not immediately the eviction process. It's, hey, what's going on in your situation? Wait, you lost your job because your car broke down. Let's look for car repairs. Let's work on finding another job. Let's stabilize you instead of allowing this to cycle you back into homelessness. And so what we found, and so again, this rooted very heavily in research and very heavily in what we deem to be the upstream problem contributing to the needs in our community, is we've created a model that is financially self-sustaining and that once proven effective is also scalable. So you can take the profit off of one housing development that's not limited to low income, because you create a site and you take people who are low income and you put them into community together. That's how you create a housing project. And so you need to pull people from different walks of life so that the common ground isn't our struggle. It's not our financial disparity or whatever. It's, hey, we went to the same high school. Hey, my dad was in the military. Hey, we're both interested in this sports team. And it's the shared community that actually happens in neighborhoods. And so you bring people from different walks of life. You have this shared organic give and take of community and all that looks like. And I could go on and on forever, but you bring people, and then the revenue raised off of one social inclusive housing site gets reinvested into the concept, and you can start to go around town and scale it. And so we have an affordable housing crisis in Green Bay, but I think every city in America, seems like they could say that. Right now, our income growth, our rental rates are increasing 25% faster than our income is. And so we have a housing shortage. We have a vacancy rate in the rental market of 1.6% is the last number I saw. And so it's just supply and demand. It's driving cost up. And so until we can come up with solutions like the scalability of social inclusive housing that can actually add to the affordable housing inventory to the point that we can stabilize cost of living, we're just going to continue to see emergency response, transitional living, hopefully get them into housing. But in the time it takes us to serve one individual through that process, we're going to have 4 more who are falling into the start of that. And so I would say housing, but then you opened up a box, and I would just say, looking at housing much broader than just the solution.
Yeah. What do you feel like your Green Bay is kind of strongest in?
We are so resource rich. We are resource rich, and yet we're small enough to know what's going on. And so we're just uniquely positioned. There's 5 area shelters who each take a different piece of the pie. We all, like each other. We're looking to collaborate. We're not looking to duplicate services. And so I think to have a community that's rich enough with the resources, but small enough that if an individual is struggling, we're in tune with their story. We're getting them connected. We're that uniquely sized town to be able to respond in that way. And I love being part of the network of nonprofits and providers that are responding and creating change.
Yeah, you've looked at it pretty holistically. What about for the individual in Green Bay that wants to make a difference? What would you recommend for them on how they can get plugged in and do something?
Yeah, so probably not the best sales pitch for St. John's, but going way back in this podcast, I would say if somebody wants to impact this at a large scale level, again, I would point them to child welfare, because I think that is the biggest. If you had to pick a single indicator of the future of homelessness in our community, I think in any community, this isn't specific to Brown County, but if you want to pulse on what your homeless situation is going to look like 20 years from now, you look at your foster care system today. And so if you want to create change, you got to go there.
Are there any organizations that come to mind? Like practically as an individual, where could I go? Because I think that's the biggest thing that people struggle with. They're like, man, they're listening to this and they're like, I really want to do something.
I would say in my community, I don't know how to reform the system. I would say if somebody wants to help reform the system, reach out to me, because I'll grab lunch, we'll compare stories, and we'll get passionate and figure it out together. I don't have that answer yet. If you want to get involved in the life of one child, because getting involved in one child can make a difference. In our community, we have a program called CASA, which is Court Appointed Special Advocate. So any kid in foster care gets referred to this program, and they get a mentor, and that mentor is showing up. So it's similar to Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but it's specific to kids in foster care. And then that mentor is writing reports. So it's one more voice to the judge about what's going on. I think that CASA worker needs a much louder voice in the system, a much, much louder voice, but it's at least a voice that's able to speak for that child in that courtroom. And so at an individual level, that's what I would encourage somebody to do if they say, how do I help a kid in foster care? I can't become a foster parent. I don't know if I could do X, Y, Z. That's something you could do. And that's given, an hour a week.
Yeah, I typically want to say this, but you seem like you can handle it. What is the best way to contact you? Because I feel like you are super open to have these conversations with people here locally here in Green Bay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'll give my email. So my email is awood, so AWOOD @sjehs.org. And so people can send me an email. They can certainly leave me a voicemail. I'm not nearly as quick to respond, but if they've got time to wait, I will check the voicemail and get back to them as well. And so if they're local, they can just look up St. John's, or they can look up Micah Center, give us a call and get in touch that way.
That's awesome. Yeah. I always tell people, if you want to start somewhere, start alongside people that are already doing the work. Last question for you is, why local? Why do you feel like it's important for us to take initiative on a local level?
it's where your home is, right? It's the legacy you're leaving. And if every community embraced local, then our entire nation would be stronger. And I look at it from a faith perspective. One of my challenges with the church, and I love the local church, I absolutely love it. But one of my challenges is Christians love to sign up for mission trips, go and serve, and then come back. And you look at that 10 years from now, that child you served in whatever country it is, isn't going to remember you specifically. And so my challenge is, did you do that for that child or did you do that for you? Because that child has, I don't want to generalize it, but American after American after American coming and touching their life. It's the experience that stands out to you. But why do we look to do foreign missions? What is it that's so easy and noble? And it's needed. I don't want to say it's not needed, but sometimes I think it's easier to go serve for 7 days or 10 days and then come back and not be struck with what that means for my life. You get involved at a local level, you can't live the same. You start leaning into whatever your bias is, in my case, homelessness, right? Or addiction or mental health or whatever it is. You start leaning into your judgments of that group and you get to know the story and you find somebody that refutes that. Now, what are you going to do with the fact that that's happening in your own backyard? And it's going to force you to change. It's going to force you to want to impact the system or find solutions or link arms with somebody else, because these are our brothers and sisters. In the case of St. John's, these are our neighbors. These are the parents of my kids' classmates. This is the person checking me out at Best Buy, or the person serving my grandma in the nursing home are the people residing at the homeless shelter at night. And so serving in your community is economic development. It is community development, because it's making your entire city richer, and it's impacting then what you're going to be able to leave as a community to the next generation as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Love Your City podcast. If you want to find ways to get involved in your community, you can visit loveyourcity.org. If you have any questions or recommendations of grassroots leaders or nonprofits that we should be aware of, email us at media@loveyourcity.org.